People with purpose. Personal friends and strangers you meet on the street. Many among you are people with purpose. Today, you will meet people who have experienced a change of heart and mind and whose lives now have meaning. This series of telecasts, led by Dr. Harold Lane, pastor of the First Baptist Church of Menlo Park, California, will seek to probe the meaning and reality which can be directional for everyone. Dr. Lane.
There's a misconception in the world today, and I would like to put a pin to that balloon. Let the air out and deflate the thought that the only people who are appealed to by the gospel and by God himself is the down and outer. Some of us think the only people who will call upon God are folks who are in need. There is the drunkard. We say he needs help, and so he'll call for God. Some will say the only one who really will turn to God for help is the man who is financially found himself in dire straits. Others will say it's the man who is physically ill, who has no place else to turn in except to turn to God. And these are the persons and people who will cry out to God. Now, that isn't true. At least I don't feel that it is. Today, I want for every one of us to examine people who have made it, so to speak, in the world and in industry and science, and have looked to God for their help. Look through history, if you will. First of all, look at a man like J.L. Kraft, J.C. Penney, Letourneau. These giants of industry and business have proven the point that men with God as their partner have achieved the heights. Look, if you will, in the field of science. Wernher von Braun certainly gives credit to God for the help which he achieved in all of the things which were a part of his accomplishment. You might even look to government, look back in our own history. The President Abraham Lincoln gives credit to God for the wonderful things achieved through his administration and by his leadership. Whether you agree with his theology or not, a man such as Albert Schweitzer is one to whom you can look and say, there's a man who trusted God and has achieved the heights. Today I have with me two men who have risen to the heights in the world, but who have recognized the presence of God and have made God their partner. Before we listen to these men, I'd like to introduce to you several of our musicians today. I have with me as my guests Reverend Randolph Farrar, who is our minister of music at the First Baptist Church in Menlo Park, Linda Dragette, who is our junior choir director, and our church organist and pianist, Mrs. Charles C. Bishop. They're going to sing for us, "The King of Love, My Shepherd Is."
The King of Love, my shepherd is, my goodness faileth never. I nothing lack if I am his, and he is mine forever. Where streams of living water flow, my ransomed soul he leadeth, wherewith the verdant pastures grow, with food celestial feedeth. The King of Love, my shield, my shepherd is. His goodness faileth never. Perverse and foolish oft I strayed, but yet in love he sought me, and on his shoulders gently shoulders all rejoicing brought me. In past dark vale I fear no ill, with thee the Lord
Thanks, Linda and Randy. You sing beautifully, and I know the reason that you sing so well. It's because you have Christ in your heart and you're willing to share the beauties that he brings to you. That really makes life purposeful after all, doesn't it? Today I have with me two gentlemen who are leaders in their vocational lives. Mr. Edward Smith is the Vice President in the International Division of Crocker Bank. He's also a statesman and an author. Along with him, I have Mr. Stanley Burris, who is President of Lockheed Missiles and Space Company and a Vice President of Lockheed Aircraft Corporation. Both of these gentlemen are related to our work at First Baptist Church, and we are justifiably proud of them, for they're both leaders in their fields. I'd like to talk first to Edward Smith, who has just recently returned from a trip to the Orient, I think to Taiwan at the invitation of the government there, and also in work for the bank, Crocker Bank, over into Korea and other parts of the Orient. Ed, I'm told that you specialize in Russian affairs for almost 30 years. This has been part of your background. You've served in the American Embassy in Moscow for many years, that you've written several books, and I happen to have a copy of one of the books you've written called The Young Stalin. Ed, with your background, do you find aspects of the Soviet Union, the government of course claims to be atheistic, do you find anything there to encourage us as Christians today?
Yes, I certainly do. I think that first of all we have to remember that the founder of the Soviet state, Lenin, insisted that it be godless. And so after 55 or 56 years of so-called godless communism, we still have a resurgence of religion, particularly among the young people. And this is something which is troubling the Soviet regime very much. And then along the same lines, I think we should not overlook this remarkable human being, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, whom the Soviet government has just ejected after forcibly arresting him. Solzhenitsyn is remarkable for several reasons. One, he served with great distinction during the war as an artillery officer. Then he was thrown into a concentration camp by Stalin, where he contracted cancer. He successfully overcame cancer and the concentration camp, and then emerged to become what many people say is Russia's greatest writer. As a matter of fact, the celebrated British critic Malcolm Muggeridge wrote not so long ago that he thought that Solzhenitsyn might be the greatest man alive. Well, that may be a little bit overdrawn, I don't know, but certainly Solzhenitsyn has presented an example for all of us. And now that he is out of Russia, I think we can really say that in all seriousness we have an authentic Russian government in exile. But what is even more remarkable is that about 4 or 5 years ago, this great writer, this great man, was converted or reconverted, I choose to call it, to Christianity. And when he came out of the Soviet Union, one of the first things that he did was to seek out the closest church and go and meditate and pray to his God. And I think this should give us all great cheer.
When you say that he was converted, Ed, you mean this was during his time when he was there in Russia that he made this decision?
Yes, he made this decision while still in the Soviet Union.
And now in his exile, he is practicing his Christian faith.
Practicing his Christian faith. Even more remarkable, as I say, because this is a man who grew up knowing nothing but communism and its atheistic and godless aspects.
What effect is this going to have on the Soviet Union, do you think?
Well, I think that there are 2 or 3 effects it's going to have. First of all, this man is a tremendous thorn in the side of the Soviet Union, the Soviet system. Only yesterday he wrote a letter to the Soviet leadership asking them to give up godless communism as a system, pointing out that it was unworkable, that they should substitute a more rational system of government with freedom. And by freedom he means freedom of expression, but also freedom to worship as one sees fit. And secondly, I think it will have a great and growing effect on the Soviet young people, which after all are now children of communism but are returning to religion in ever-growing numbers.
Do you, in your background, I understand you read and write Russian, having spent some time there
Yes,
in
I do.
that country. In your intercourse of conversation with young people, do you see signs of encouragement for Christians in this country?
Yes, I do. I think that's perfectly apparent in your own church, that there are more and more young people attending there, which I think is another thing that we can be very thankful for.
Indeed so. I understand that you're a vice president now, Ed, with Crocker Bank International Division. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And how did you make the transition from government and the embassy in Russia to banking?
Well, actually, it wasn't too difficult because I've always been involved in international affairs in one way or another, and international banking, of course, is by definition international in character. Therefore, the transition wasn't too difficult at all.
Now I want to really point a question at you, which I think I may know the answer to, but I'd like to hear it from you. What has motivated you during your career? Ed, what has really been the stimulus in all of these achievements that have been yours?
Well, I can say unequivocally that it has been my faith in Christ from a very early age. I won't say that I haven't at times found occasion when I failed to consult Christ before I made a principal decision, but certainly in those occasions I found to my utter dismay that it was a wrong decision that I'd made. And I simply regard that, as the French say, as my raison d'etre, my reason for existence. And it's just as simple as that.
It's simple but well put. Now, I know there are young people who are watching, as well as adults, who are going to be impressed by the fact of a man of your caliber and of your position will give honor and due respect to Christ for his movement in your life. I'm thrilled to hear that, and I'm particularly pleased to hear what's happening in Russia, because most of us are concerned with what's going on in that land that seems so far away from us, and your experience there is stimulating to all. Another guest today is a member of our church, a member of our Board of Trustees, Stan Burris, who I've known now for several years. Stan is a man of knowledge and ability in the field of science. Stan, I understand you were involved in some of the early testing of the atomic bomb. Did that have any bearing upon your spiritual attitudes, would you say?
Why, yes, very definitely, Harold. Back in the, as you may recall, in the late 40s and early 50s, when we were still unwisely, I think, doing atmospheric testing, I was responsible for the NOETOC operations. And I recall the going in, so to speak, after the test, where one could stay as much as 3 minutes, depending on where you were, coming upon a scene of just complete devastation. It was almost an unbelievably desolate and damaged, if you will, scene. The dead birds and even the fish in the tidal pools were blistered. This stuck with me for quite a while. And some 10 months later, when I went back, which was consistent with my schedule, I went back to NOETOC and walked over that same ground with somewhat more leisurely because the radiation had died down. I found that quite a difference, that to my almost utter disbelief, the green things had started to come back. For example, the coconuts buried in the sand were sprouting, and the indigenous grasses and vines and so forth were coming back, and the birds were there. I was a little bit put out about this because the atmosphere, the environment to which this island or these islands had been subjected, no one had a right to expect this sort of thing to happen. Well, I'm not a botanist, and perhaps a botanist might not agree with me, but the point is that it did happen, and I had a rather good feeling about it, and I wondered if there wasn't some message there that perhaps something was going on that even things like atomic fusion, fission, what have you, could not overcome. And after some years of thinking about this, well, it takes people years, especially me, I concluded that there had to be a more powerful force in this world than whatever man could create. And if the world was going to be destroyed, it was going to be done by someone else beside man. I couldn't convince myself that man would be permitted to proceed with his own self-destruction. He may try very hard, and let's hope he does not. But in the end, this is an option, so to speak, of a higher power. Well, this led me to a somewhat philosophical and theological, if you will, consideration of what this power was. And of course, this led me back to God, where I had God and Jesus Christ, with whom I'd grown up and neglected many years. So the point is that I recognized this and this power and began to pay due respect to it and to invited Jesus Christ back into my life, and have lived with him from that time on, day by day. And as my friend here has just pointed out, that the things you commit to him are wisely done, and those not committed come out somewhat questionably, to say the least.
All right. Stan, do you find it difficult to be the head of a large company in the face of the current national mood?
Well, being the head of a large company is always difficult, almost without regard to national mood. But I think the non-defense or anti-defense or anti-war mood that's in the minds of people today, and this is not all to the bad. People should be thinking this way. Companies like ours do not receive an awful lot of sympathy, and in fact, our anti-fan mail, if I can coin that phrase, would fill a boxcar, I guess, over a period of a month. But we have, I think the aerospace industry on the whole has made a serious attempt, and an expensive attempt, to branch out into what I call people's programs, and namely those programs which use that technology for the benefit of mankind rather than its destruction. For example, waste management and unique power sources and that sort of thing are coming along rather rapidly within the industry. Mm-hmm. And there's a great deal of attention being paid to this, in addition to doing the job we're in business for, namely seeing to it that the country is adequately defended, which we still need in spite of the somewhat rosy-hued glasses some people wear on the subject.
That's right. Stan, would you consider yourself a purposeful person? That's a hard question, but to give to you without modesty, would you?
Oh, I think so. I think everybody considers himself purposeful. I do, certainly. In accepting Christ and committing my problems and in fact my life to him, and thereby made him a partner, you naturally end up with a purpose, and the purpose has to be not only how good is Burris or how bad is Burris at any one time, but how good is he doing and how much good is he doing. And I think that I've tried as best I can to use whatever position the Lord has sent my way, and it is his sending, to consider the dignity of men and women. This is a tough problem. One has to deal with people and consider that they're not subordinates, they're not shop hands, they're not janitors, but people, right, each of whom has a level of dignity. And this is, I think, the secret of management these days, and I've tried hard to do this. With what success, I guess other people have to say.
Gentlemen, you have given to us, I think, some insights into the reason for the success you have achieved. I think you've both been extremely modest, as I know a little bit about both of you, and the thing that really captures my attention is the fact that these gentlemen have reached some very high places in the world, but the motivating influence behind their success, both of them attest, is a faith in Jesus Christ, and we're thankful for your willingness to share that. Now again, we're going to hear from our minister of music of the First Baptist Church in Menlo Park, the Reverend Randy Farrar. Randy will sing for us now.
Arise, O Jerusalem, and stand on high, and look about toward the east, and behold, thy children gathered from the west and to the east, by the word of the Holy One, rejoicing in the remembrance of God. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace, that publisheth salvation, that saith unto Zion, that saith unto Zion, thy God reigneth. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings. The glorious majesty of the Lord shall endure forever. The Lord shall rejoice in all his works. The Lord shall rejoice in all his works. The earth shall tremble at the touch of him. If he do but touch the hills, they shall smoke. I will sing unto the Lord as long as I live. I will praise my God while I have my being. I will sing, I will sing, I will sing unto the Lord as long as I live. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him that bringeth good tidings. Peace, peace.
The Apostle Paul in the New Testament is recorded as having said, I can do all things. Doesn't that sound like a presumptuous and a bold statement to make? I can do all things? Who ever thought of being able to say to anyone, I can do anything? But Paul said, I can do all things. But that just isn't all he was saying. You have to go to the completement of that statement to understand what he was really trying to convey. He was saying, I can do all things through Christ who is my strength. The ability to do everything is only given to the person who subscribes to the knowledge that purpose and meaning comes through Jesus Christ himself. Doing all things means that I am able to achieve heights that ordinarily I couldn't make. But I need that added resource. I need that power. I need that ability that gives to me some encouragement. I have a friend who has all kinds of resolutions and ambitions, and he sets them very, very high. Actually, they're out of reach. And this man seemingly is always in the doldrums because he set his goals so high without the ability and without the power to achieve them. Paul knew better than that when he said, I can do all things through Christ, for he is my strength. Some of those of you who watch today are asking, why should I ever even think about trying to be like the men that we've heard interviewed today? I could never achieve those heights. There's no way in which I can have the ability to do the things that they and others have done. But the genius of this is that you can do it. If you can believe in yourself, and more than that, you can believe in Jesus Christ. Confidence, optimism, how does it come? My friend, it comes by faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. And Paul learned that secret by saying, I can do all things through Jesus Christ. Would you like to be a person of purpose? You can be, you know. I've written a little booklet which is entitled People with Purpose. It can be yours. I'd like to send it to you free of charge. It won't cost you a thing. But I'd like for you to write to this station that is listed for you, the People with Purpose, Box 7744, San Francisco. It can be yours. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.